continuación, tendremos la conferencia con el señor Erik Fowler, gerente de Rocky Mountain Institute. El señor Fowler es gerente de Rocky Mountain Institute, donde actualmente trabaja en proyectos de transformación a través de las áreas de práctica de electricidad de edificios y comunidades. Fue asociado senior en el grupo de energía y ambiente en la firma de consultoría internacional ICF, apoyando la implementación de un programa de eficiencia energética comercial. El señor Fowler nos habla sobre las emisiones de carbono para una estrategia de energía comunitaria exitosa. Recibamos entonces con un caluroso aplauso la última conferencia de la mañana.
Can you hear me okay? Hola, me llamo Erik Fowler y trabajo con Rocky Mountain Institute en Colorado. Yo les agradezco por invitarme a participar y presentar en este foro y por la invitación a la hermosa ciudad de Panamá. No hablo español con mucha facilidad y por lo tanto voy a presentar en inglés. Gracias. I told Roberto if he would buy me dinner last night that I would practice my Spanish. So Rocky Mountain Institute was co-founded in 1982 in the United States by Amory Lovins, who is now our chairman emeritus and chief scientist. We have about 3 offices, one in Washington, D.C., Boulder, Colorado, and New York. In 2011, we published a book called Reinventing Fire, which uses a typical RMI approach, asking the question first, what is possible, and then mapped pathways for running a 158% bigger US economy in 2050, but needing no oil or coal, and representing a $5 trillion US net present value savings over business as usual. So a big undertaking, but we just wanted to show that it was possible and it was economically viable to run an economy that increasingly uses more energy efficiency and renewables as part of a strategic plan. I'm happy to say that in 2013, RMI was invited to participate with the government of China with their Energy Resource Institute in developing their 5-year plan to include more low-carbon energy sources and more energy efficiency into their economy. I have 3 things that I'm going to discuss. I promise I realize that I'm the last person standing between you and lunch. So I will spend a little bit of time on the first one. I'll move very quickly through the second one because I think the prior presentation did a great job of talking about community energy opportunities and community energy planning. And then I'll briefly highlight a few things for you from our recent report on next generation energy management and corporate real estate. So just to take a step back, we always like to remind people that I think this graph shows nicely how financial markets, corporations, communities, states, cities, countries are increasingly embracing more choices around renewable energy and energy efficiency. New business models, information technology, and a new mindset, particularly a new mindset with a new generation, are converging upon an energy revolution, we believe, in our lifetimes. And this has significant implications for local energy security, keeping energy dollars local rather than shipping them somewhere else, and increasing community resiliency, as the mayor talked about, as well as expanding market opportunities. But also, and important to me, are the environmental and climate change benefits that come along with that. So, there we go. This slide is just a classical diffusion slide that highlights what happens, I think, when we commit to something that we believe is good for our economy and for our planet, and where we learn and we adapt. So as experience increases, prices decrease, adoption spreads as the technology and economics improve. And in this case, as you can see with solar and with batteries, the price continues to drop to the point where solar energy is increasingly becoming cheaper than business as usual. And we believe that this transition will continue to accelerate in many countries and across the world, and in part because of this unique convergence of technology and innovative business models, innovative financing models, and a desire, even perhaps a demand by communities and by companies that they have more choices about their energy. So that's the big picture. I'd like to just jump into a little bit of the work that Rocky Mountain Institute does with some leading U.S. communities. We're also working with 10 islands in the Caribbean on energy strategy and energy planning. And of course, I just mentioned China, and are always looking for opportunities to collaborate on innovative and scalable energy ideas. This highlights, I think, the 4 biggest impact areas. This is not news to you. We've talked about it earlier today, but most of the major impact areas and opportunities for significantly decreasing CO2 emissions and increasing renewables and increasing efficiency fall into one of these 4 main groups: transportation, electricity, and energy supply, which in the United States also includes quite a bit of natural gas, and building efficiency in our homes and businesses. And what's interesting is that we're finding that many smaller communities are really leading the change. They're really the innovators. And what we found is that I think you saw something very similar to this now twice today, but there are important steps in a community energy action plan in our experience. For those of you who might be interested in how these leading communities that we've been working with are creating this change. And I'm not going to walk through all these steps except to note that we have found that having an energy working group, particularly a big one to kind of kick things off, much like you're doing here in some sense, is a way to start the conversation, create a safe space for people to be able to talk about an energy vision and energy goals that they would like for their community or for their country in the future. So we often encourage communities to have that type of energy working group, and it's important to invite the right people, right? So you want to invite utilities and government and university people and energy and environmental groups and get them all in the same place, keep them from fighting, and talk about what they would like to see in the future. And typically some of these goals revolve around 20% emissions reduction by 2020, 80% by 2050, things like that. We've also found that communicating the results is really, really important. A lot of times communities do good work, but they don't really communicate their efforts well. This is an example of a typical energy, what we call landscape or assessment for a typical U.S. community. In this case, Fort Collins, Colorado. You can see electricity is the primary source of emissions and fossil fuel use. 24% is transportation. 20% in the U.S. is usually natural gas and landfill waste. Those are pretty typical blocks that you see. I noticed that your transportation emissions that the mayor put up was almost identical to this. Notice how the city of Fort Collins communicated the benefits on the right. Accelerate carbon goals over 20 years, net benefit to the community of $265 million over the period, reduce annual cash flow out of the community, reduce energy dollars being spent elsewhere, increase local investment by $30 million, and estimated number of jobs for Fort Collins, which is not a very big city, 400 to 500 new jobs. So again, some suggestions if you see this undertaking in your near future, and it looks like you're already doing quite a bit of this, is assess what's possible first, find a significant project to build support around. You can usually figure out what that is, get started, and keep expanding. Okay. So I'll switch gears again. I think we're doing okay on time. I promise to make this reasonably brief. Now I'll move on to another piece of our work at RMI, which is related to buildings, which we've had a long history in, especially around energy management in commercial office space and in commercial real estate. As all of you know, I know this is not news to any of you, but buildings represent the largest single share of global energy use, and a major opportunity, we believe, for profitable energy investment by the companies that occupy them. The numbers are really big. Buildings, account for some 60% of worldwide electricity demand and 40% of primary energy consumption in most countries. It's interesting that some of the largest US and international companies have already committed to becoming 100% powered by renewable energy. However, it's also fair to say that the majority of the world's companies still do not have specific goals concerning energy efficiency or renewable energy or greenhouse gas emissions. So we worked with a group called CoreNet Global to learn about real estate trends related to energy performance, and we wanted to be able to release a document that would help building owners, building operators, and real estate investors to capture aggressive energy goals and make them profitable. So the guide on the left, Next Generation Energy Management, is a working paper that provides a set of strategic solutions and the evidence for taking action. It highlights a few basic value streams or value elements and leads real estate practitioners through the process of evaluating those in their decision-making process. So for instance, retrofit capital costs for energy efficiency retrofits, non-energy operating costs. Again, non-energy operating costs can reduce operating costs. Obviously, we know this through maintenance, lower insurance, lower occupant turnover rates. Tenant revenues, sales revenues are often higher in LEED and Energy Star certified buildings. We know this. And I think the trend in the US commercial market is pretty solid with these two graphs. You can see that green buildings and energy efficient built and labeled buildings in the US are most likely here to stay. But that's new construction, and we still in the US have a substantial amount of buildings that are already built. So we continue to struggle with that. I will point out that there are some significant energy efficiency and renewable energy adoption drivers among among top US companies and many international companies. So customer demands. Retail and business customers are increasingly demanding sustainability performance. Shareholder demands. Growth of enterprise-wide sustainability measurements that shareholders demand. Attracting and retaining employees, increasingly the millennials, the generation just behind me, want to work for companies that help to improve our society. In the US, federal regulatory requirements and local regulatory requirements. It's interesting that California now requires all new commercial buildings to be net zero energy by 2030, after they just revised their Title 24 building standard. And so what is enabling this? Well, again, more cost-effective solutions LED, for instance, a growing value and interest in the health and safety of productive buildings, improving energy analytics for buildings. In the US, new finance mechanisms, and local leadership. Again, going back to the community and cities leading the way. Many companies, again, I think are leading by example, capturing opportunities presented by energy efficiency and capturing opportunities with renewable energy, and they're committed to expanding those investments. For example, IBM has already saved US $477 million cumulatively from its energy conservation efforts, and Walmart has said that they expect to save $1 billion annually from their energy efficiency and renewable energy initiatives. Roughly 60% of the largest US companies and roughly 2/3 of the top global companies have set greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, greenhouse gas reduction goals, and they have also set renewable energy commitments as part of their corporate sustainability goals. So Apple and Procter & Gamble, for instance, along with Walmart, have all committed to 100% renewable energy over the course of time. And guess what? They often do not or cannot cite the renewables needed for those commitments on site. So who are they going to turn to help them meet those renewable energy requirements? Utilities. And so we're seeing a lot more utility response to customer choice and customer demands in the United States, particularly with green power programs, so-called green tariffs. So the next few slides, just very briefly, I know we talk a lot about net zero and how to get on that path. I like to think of net zero as multiple levers that can be pulled. Energy efficiency is one of them. On-site generation is one of them. Managing load, green power purchasing, as I just mentioned. Again, green power purchasing is, I think, an important option and comes in many forms. Many U.S. utilities are offering their customers competitive renewable energy plans, again, because companies are demanding them. In my home state of Texas, for instance, green wind power programs are now cheaper in many cases than traditional grid power. And by the way, I'm happy to see that there's one other place in the world that I've found that is more hot and humid than Houston. Right. I'm not from Colorado, I just work there. Okay, equally hot and humid. Investing in smart building management. I think Tesco is a good example of that. They did a pilot with IBM in one of their Ireland stores, and they used basically advanced energy analytics to study their refrigeration costs. The pilot basically led to about a 20% reduction in refrigeration costs for the company, and they haven't implemented it across all their stores yet, but they estimate that when they do, it will save the company about $20 million annually. And their goal is to reduce their energy use by half by 2020. And interestingly, Tesco has 6 carbon neutral stores. Emphasizing strategies for health and productivity, Google is leveraging energy efficiency measures to improve health and productivity. And they use energy efficiency as a metric in their decision-making process about where to invest their money. So again, I know we always tend to talk about energy cost savings, and that's really important. It's usually the first important piece. But I'm pretty convinced that energy cost savings energy costs are really the smallest line item usually on a company's balance sheet, unless they are an industry-intensive And so I think that many companies are responding to renewables and efficiency for other reasons. Customer demand, shareholder demand, and these reasons right here. Their employees are demanding it. The strong correlation that we know that exists between well-lit, well-ventilated spaces and a workforce that increasingly cares about where they work. I won't go into this very much except to say that PACE financing in the United States has turned out to be something that is continuing to grow. It's essentially a financing mechanism that is enabled at the local level and allows companies to finance energy efficiency projects over a reasonable amount of time and attach the repayment of that to their property tax bill. And it's had mixed success, but it does appear to be growing, and it does appear to be a fairly solid model, especially on the commercial side. PricewaterhouseCoopers, I like to mention them because we talk, I know, quite a bit about green leases. Let me get to write my correct notes here. Oh, okay. Before PwC takes occupancy of a building, they negotiate with landlords to encourage them to implement sustainability measures. And the company uses a standard lease that contains clauses for LEED certification, energy and water efficiency, indoor air quality, even green cleaning products. And then they track those measurements over time. They have a goal of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions 30% by 2016, and they've recently been recognized as a leader in green leases by the U.S. Department of Energy. Example, again, I think of how big companies can have real impact on the market by negotiating with the parties that they do business with every day. Taking a holistic and value-driven approach is really one of the core RMI ways of looking at the world, and AT&T has done a good job from what we can tell with one of their facilities assessing energy efficiency into their decision-making process beyond just energy cost savings, and they've projected to save about $191 million in annual energy costs. Now, I'm sure that has a lot to do with why they're doing the energy efficiency, but increasingly they're talking more about the value beyond energy cost savings. So I'll sum up by putting this slide up here, this real typical complicated RMI graph that we're seeing, again, an emerging discussion in the US about this. The general practice today, I think, is to evaluate energy efficiency based on energy cost savings. However, we all know in this business that these transformed spaces provide additional benefits which may or may not be quantified or measured. So thinking about this additional value is important because the people costs of a company tend to be much, much higher. They're estimated sometimes to be 100 times larger than the energy costs of a company. So in summary, I would just say that I think that well-structured energy investment yields value beyond energy cost savings alone, and it is important to consider these non-energy benefits in a formal way as part of a decision-making process like these companies that I showed you are doing. And Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, we offer a methodology, a practice guide. It's called Deep Retrofit Value. It was one of the guides I showed on the first few slides, and you're welcome to download it from our website, which is www.rmi.org. That's all I've got, but I know that you'd love to eat lunch, but we do have a couple of minutes if you'd like to talk about anything, or if you'd like me to answer any questions, I'm happy to. No, it's not hard. Well, I did my graduate degree work on that very topic. I'm guessing probably not, for really basic reasons, right? The U.S. economy is driven primarily by market economics. So to the extent that we put a price on carbon, either through some sort of cap and trade mechanism or through a carbon tax, there's pros and cons to both, then I think that's certainly more likely to move move our investments and guide our decision making in a better way.
Su atención, por favor. Su atención, por favor. Una alarma de incendio se ha reportado en el edificio. Una alarma de incendio se ha reportado en el edificio.
And now we're going to have a fire drill. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thank you for listening.